Admiral Dongwoo Kim stood at the window of Earth's orbital station, watching the alien ships arrive. 3 massive vessels hung in space like dark metal mountains. They had been waiting for 2 days now, and still no word from the Galactic Council about why they had come. The ships were beautiful in a cold way, with smooth curves and strange lights that pulsed like slow heartbeats. "Sir, they're requesting another meeting," said Captain Tae-Ho Lee, walking up behind the Admiral. His voice was tired. They had been trying to talk to the aliens for hours, but every conversation ended the same way. The Council wanted to speak only to Earth's highest leaders. Dongwoo turned from the window. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes from years of looking at stars. He had fought in the Mars Wars 20 years ago, back when humanity's biggest worry was fighting each other over red dirt and ice. Now they faced something much bigger. "What do they want this time?" he asked. "The same thing. They want to meet with Earth's government. All of it. They say it's about humanity's future in the galaxy." The Admiral frowned. In the 6 months since Earth had made contact with alien life, everything had moved fast. Too fast. First came the excitement of learning they were not alone. Then came the shock of discovering that humans were late to a very old party. The galaxy was full of life, and it all belonged to something called the Galactic Council. Dr. Sujin. Park walked into the room, carrying a thick folder of papers. She was Earth's best expert on alien life, even though she had only been studying real aliens for half a year. Before that, she had spent her life guessing what aliens might be like. Reality had been both better and worse than her guesses. "The meeting is set," she said. 2 hours from now, they're sending a shuttle to pick up our delegation." "Who's going?" Dongwoo asked. "You, me, Captain Lee, and Ambassador Yoon. They specifically asked for military and science representatives." The Admiral did not like that. In his experience, when someone wanted to talk to both your military and your scientists at the same time, they were planning something that involved both war and technology, usually not in a good way. 2 hours later, they sat in the alien shuttle, watching Earth grow smaller through the window. The shuttle was quiet except for a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The walls glowed with soft blue light, and the seats felt like they were made of something between metal and cloth. Captain Lee looked nervous. He was younger than the others, with dark hair and quick eyes. He had been chosen to lead Earth's first diplomatic missions, because he was good at reading people. The problem was, aliens were not people, and their faces did not show emotions the same way. Dr. Park was making notes on her tablet, writing down everything she saw. She was a small woman with short hair and thick glasses that made her eyes look bigger than they were. She had wanted to study aliens her whole life, but now that she was doing it, she felt like she was always one step behind. Ambassador Ji Hye-yoon sat quietly, going over her notes one more time. She was Earth's most skilled diplomat, a woman who could make enemies into friends with just the right words. But she had never tried to make friends with creatures from other worlds before. The council ship was huge inside, with corridors that went on forever and ceilings so high they disappeared into darkness. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, changing colors as the humans walked past. The air smelled like metal and something sweet that none of them could identify. They were led to a round room with a table in the center. Around the table sat 12 beings, each one different from the others. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange that the humans had trouble understanding what they were seeing. At the head of the table sat the largest creature, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. This was Counselor Velthar, the leader of the hegemonic species that ran the council. "Welcome, humans," Velthar said. His voice came from a device around his neck that turned his words into English. "We are pleased to finally meet with your leaders." Admiral Kim stood straight and tried to look confident. "Thank you for inviting us. Earth is honored to meet with the Galactic Council." Velthar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Yes, Earth. Your small blue world has caused quite a stir in the galaxy. You developed faster than light travel very quickly. Most species take much longer." "We're fast learners," said Ambassador Yoon with a diplomatic smile. "Indeed. That is why we must discuss your future." Velthar touched something on the table, and the air above it filled with images. Pictures of Earth, of human cities, of the colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. You have built much in a short time. Very impressive. Dr. Park watched the images carefully. They showed things that Earth had never shared with the Council. Somehow the aliens knew everything about human civilization. They had been watching for a long time. However, Velthar continued, rapid growth can be dangerous. The galaxy is a complex place, with many rules that keep peace between species. Earth must learn these rules. We're willing to learn, said Captain Lee. That's why we're here. Good. Learning begins with understanding your place. The images changed, showing star maps with trade routes and territorial boundaries. Every species in the galaxy has found their proper role. Some are good at mining. Others excel at farming. Some are natural soldiers. Each contributes what they do best. Admiral Kim felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He had heard speeches like this before, back when stronger nations tried to tell weaker ones what their role should be. It never ended well for the weaker nation. What role do you see for humanity? He asked. Velthar's forearms moved in what might have been a gesture of pleasure. Earth is rich in rare elements that the galaxy needs. Your people are strong and adapt well to different environments. You would make excellent miners and laborers. The silence in the room was thick. Ambassador Yoon kept her diplomatic smile, but her eyes were hard. And in return? Protection, of course. Trade opportunities. Access to galactic technology and knowledge. All the benefits of civilization. At what cost? Dr. Park asked quietly. Velthar touched the table again. New images appeared, showing contracts and agreements. Earth will contribute 70% of its rare earth elements to the galactic market. Human colonies will be established only in systems approved by the Council. Earth's military will be limited to system defense only. These are standard terms for new members. Admiral Kim read the floating words above the table. With each line, his anger grew hotter. These aren't membership terms. This is surrender. It is integration, Velthar said firmly. Every species goes through this process. It ensures stability and peace. And if we refuse? Captain Lee asked. The room grew colder. The other council, members who had been silent until now, all turned to look at the humans. Velthar's expression did not change, but something in his posture became threatening. Refusal would be unfortunate. New species sometimes experience difficulties, system failures, accidents. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for those without protection. Ambassador Yoon's smile finally disappeared. That sounds like a threat. It is a fact. Species that try to remain independent face many challenges. Their colonies fail, their ships malfunction, their people suffer. It is much better to accept the guidance of those with experience. Dr. Park realized what she was hearing. This was not an offer of friendship. It was extortion on a galactic scale. The Council had done this before, many times. They had turned entire civilizations into slaves and convinced them it was for their own good. Admiral Kim stood up slowly. We need time to consider your offer. Of course. You have one galactic standard month. That should be sufficient time for Earth to make the right decision. As they were led back to their shuttle, none of the humans spoke. They all understood what had just happened. Earth had 30 days to choose between slavery and war, with the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. But what the Council did not know was that humans had never been good at accepting impossible choices. They had a habit of finding third options, even when everyone said there were none. The shuttle carried them back to Earth, and Admiral Kim stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a galaxy full of species that had given up their freedom for safety. They had accepted that some beings were born to rule and others were born to serve. They had never met humans before. Earth had 30 days to teach the galaxy a lesson about the difference between impossible and just very, very difficult. Agent Hyun-Soo Choi sat in a dark room filled with screens and blinking lights. For 3 weeks he had been doing what he did best, finding secrets that others wanted to keep hidden. The Council thought their computer systems were safe from human hackers. They were wrong. Hyun-Soo was Earth's best intelligence operative, a quiet man with sharp eyes who could disappear into any crowd. He had spent years learning how alien minds worked, studying their psychology and behavior patterns. Now all that knowledge was paying off. "Got something," he said into his headset. Dr. Soo-Jin Park's voice came back through the speaker. "What did you find?" "The Council has done this before. Many times. I found their files on something called the Integration Protocol." On his main screen, Hyun-Soo pulled up documents written in alien languages. His computer translated them into English, but the meaning was clear even in the original text. The Council had a step-by-step plan for conquering new species without firing a shot. "How many species?" Dr. Park asked. "All of them. Every single member of the Council went through this same process. First the ultimatum, then the threats, then the engineered disasters if they refuse." Hyun-Soo scrolled through file after file. "Look at this one. The Corvan Republic. They refused the Council's terms 50 years ago." "What happened to them?" "Their main colony suffered a reactor failure that killed millions. Their trade ship started having engine problems in deep space. Food shipments got lost. Within a year, they were begging to join the Council on any terms." Dr. Park was quiet for a moment. "Accidents? No accidents. I found the technical specifications. The Council had sabotaged everything." Hyun-Soo highlighted several files on his screen. "They have weapons that can make any technology fail from a distance. Ships, power plants, life support systems. They can destroy a civilization without anyone knowing they did it." In another part of Earth's orbital station, engineer Bo-Ram Kang was taking apart a piece of Council technology. It was a small device that the aliens had given to Earth as a gift. During their first meeting, they called it a universal translator, but Bo-Ram suspected it was much more than that. Bo-Ram was a small woman with steady hands and a mind that could see how any machine worked just by looking at it. She had been reverse engineering alien technology since first contact, trying to understand how far ahead of humanity the Council really was. "Interesting," she muttered, using a tiny laser to cut into the device's outer shell. Inside, she found circuits made of materials that did not exist on Earth, but the design was simpler than she had expected. "What's interesting?" asked her assistant. "A young engineer named Woo Jin who was learning to work with alien technology." "This isn't as advanced as they want us to think," Bo-Ram said. "Look at these connections. They're using brute force where we would use elegance. It works, but it's not efficient." She connected the device to her computer and began analyzing its code. What she found surprised her even more. The technology was powerful, but it was also old, very old, and it had not been improved in centuries. They stopped innovating, she realized. Everything they have is based on the same basic designs they've been using for 1,000 years. Why would they do that? Bo-Ram thought about it as she worked. Because they didn't need to improve. When you can force everyone to give you what you want, why waste time making better tools? Meanwhile, Ambassador Ji-Hae Yoon was having secret meetings with representatives from other species. Not official meetings, of course. The Council would not allow that. But in a galaxy full of different cultures, there were always ways to have quiet conversations. The first was with someone from the Veltar species, the same race as Counselor Veltar, but from a lower class. His name was Kethron, and he worked as a translator for council meetings. He was nervous, constantly looking around as if someone might be watching. "Why did you want to meet with me?" Ji-Hae asked. They were in a small cafe on the station, surrounded by beings from dozens of different worlds. "Because you're new," Catherine said. "You don't understand yet, but you will." "Understand what?" "That resistance is impossible. Every species learns this lesson eventually." His voice was bitter. "My people were proud once. We had our own empire, our own technology. Now we serve the hegemony and pretend it was our choice." Ji-Hae studied his face. Despite their different biology, she could see pain in his expression. "What happened?" "The same thing that will happen to you. First, they will offer partnership. Then they will demand tribute. If you refuse, your worlds will start having problems. Food shortages, system failures, disease outbreaks. It will continue until you submit." "Has anyone ever successfully resisted?" Kethran was quiet for a long time. "There were some. The Corvan tried, The Zelish Empire fought back for almost a decade, but in the end, they all surrendered. The Council is too strong, and they have too many ways to hurt you without leaving evidence. What if someone found evidence? Evidence of what? That old reactors sometimes fail? That ships have accidents in deep space? That diseases spread through trade routes? Kethran made a sound like bitter laughter. The Council is very good at making their attacks look like natural disasters. Jihai had similar conversations with representatives from 6 other species. Each one told the same story: pride, resistance, disasters, submission. The galaxy was full of broken civilizations that had forgotten what freedom looked like. But there was something else in these conversations, something that gave Jihai hope. When she talked about resistance, about fighting back, she saw something flicker in their eyes. Fear, yes, but also longing. They wanted to believe that someone could stand up to the Council and win. Dr. Park was coordinating all the intelligence gathering from her laboratory. She had files spread across every surface, connecting information from dozens of sources. What she was seeing painted a clear picture of how the Council operated. "They're parasites," she said during a video call with the investigation team. "They don't create anything new. They just take from others and use fear to maintain control." Agent Choi nodded from his position in the computer center. "The evidence is overwhelming. They've been using the same tactics for centuries. Intimidation, sabotage, economic pressure, but they've never faced a species that knew what they were doing. Because they control information," added Engineer Kang. "Every species that joins the Council gets their version of history. They learn that resistance is futile because the Council always wins." "But what if someone broke that pattern?" Dr. Park asked. "What if a species not only resisted but exposed the whole system?" Ambassador Yoon leaned forward on her screen. "That's the key. It's not enough to resist. We have to prove to the galaxy that the Council can be beaten. We have to show them that their perfect system has flaws." "Do we have time?" Agent Choi asked. "We have 1 week left before the deadline." Dr. Park looked at her files. 3 weeks of investigation had revealed the Council's methods, their weaknesses, and their history. But it had also revealed how powerful they were and how many species they controlled. "We need to get this information to Admiral Kim," she said. "Earth needs to know exactly what we're facing." The meeting took place in a secure conference room deep inside the orbital station. Admiral Kim listened as the investigation team presented their findings. With each revelation, his expression grew more serious. "So they're not just demanding tribute," he said when they finished. "They're planning to turn humanity into slaves. Willing slaves," Dr. Park corrected. "That's the worst part. After a few generations of Council control, most species forget they were ever free. They start to believe that serving the hegemony is their natural role. And if we refuse..." Agent Choi pulled up a holographic display showing Earth and its colonies. "They'll hit us where it hurts most. The Mars colonies depend on Earth for food shipments. The Jupiter mining stations need regular supply runs. If those systems start failing, millions die," Admiral Kim finished. "And it looks like accidents." "That's how they work," Ambassador Yoon said. "They never declare war. They just make life impossible until you surrender." Engineer Kong cleared her throat. "But there is good news. Their technology is old and rigid. They haven't had to innovate because they haven't faced real opposition. If we can surprise them..." "Can we?" the Admiral asked. Dr. Park looked around the room at her team. They had spent 3 weeks learning everything they could about humanity's enemies. The picture was frightening, but it was not hopeless. "Yes," she said. "But not the way they expect. They're prepared for military resistance or diplomatic negotiation. They're not prepared for something completely different." "What do you have in mind?" Dr. Park smiled for the first time in weeks. "They want to play the same game they've been playing for centuries. They think humans will follow the same script as every other species. But what if we change the rules entirely?" Admiral Kim leaned back in his chair. Outside the conference, room windows. Earth turned slowly in the darkness, unaware that its future was being decided in this small room. "Tell me more," he said. The investigation phase was over. Now it was time to plan humanity's response to an ultimatum that had never been refused. The Council expected surrender or futile resistance. They were about to learn that humans specialized in impossible third options. General Wu Jin Shin stood in the middle of the largest factory on Earth, watching robots work at speeds that would have been impossible just months ago. The factory had been building civilian ships before the Council's ultimatum. Now it was making something very different. "How many can we build in 1 week?" he asked the factory manager, a tired-looking woman named Dr. Young Mi Han, who had not slept properly in days. "At current speed? Maybe 50 ships? But these aren't normal ships, General. Each one is completely different from the others." Young Mi was right. Instead of mass-producing identical vessels like every other species in the galaxy, Earth was building ships that looked like they had come from 50 different civilizations. Some were sleek and fast, others were heavy and armored. A few looked like they barely held together. "That's the point," General Shin said. "The Council expects us to fight like everyone else. Standard formations, predictable tactics, uniform equipment. We're going to give them something they've never seen before." The general walked over to a workstation where engineers were designing weapons systems. The lead engineer, a young man named Jae-min, looked up from his computer screen. "How are the weapons coming?" Shin asked. "Strange, sir, but they should work." Jae-min pointed to his designs. "Most species in the galaxy use energy weapons that work the same way. The Council's ships are designed to defend against those weapons, so we're making projectile weapons that fire solid metal at very high speeds. Old-fashioned. Bullets! Very fast, very smart bullets. Their shields can stop energy, but they're not designed for kinetic impact. It's like bringing a sword to a laser fight." Across the solar system, Commander Sung-Ho Park was training Earth's new space navy in tactics that had never been used in galactic warfare. His flagship was hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, along with 60 other ships that looked nothing like each other. "Remember," he told his captains during their daily briefing, "we don't fight like the Council expects. No formations, no predictable patterns. Each ship acts independently and adapts to whatever happens." Captain Min-Soo was commanding one of the smaller vessels, a ship that looked like it was held together with spare parts. "What if we lose communication with each other? Then you keep fighting on your own." Every ship captain knows the mission: protect civilians, disrupt Council operations, and prove that humans can't be bullied. Commander Park looked around the room at faces that were young and determined. The Council has been using the same tactics for 1,000 years. They've forgotten how to deal with chaos. "Sir," said Captain Yoon-ji, who was barely 30 years old, but had already proven herself in simulator battles, "what about their superior? Numbers? Intelligence says they have thousands of ships." "Numbers don't matter if you can't use them effectively. The Council's ships are designed to work together in large fleets, but large fleets are slow and predictable. We're going to hit them fast and disappear before they can respond." On Earth itself, Dr. Young Mi Han was working on humanity's secret weapon. It was not a gun or a bomb. It was something much more dangerous to the Council's way of life. "Show me the numbers again," she said to her assistant, analyst Yoon-ji Kim, who specialized in galactic economics. Yoon-ji pulled up charts and graphs on the main screen. "The Council's economy depends on tribute from member species. 70% of their resources come from worlds that are forced to give them away. If those species stopped paying tribute, the Council would collapse," Dr. Han finished. "But how do we convince dozens of species to rebel at the same time? We don't convince them. We show them it's possible." Yoon-ji highlighted several star systems on the map. "These are species that have been under Council control for less than 50 years. They still remember being free. If they see Earth successfully resist, they might try it themselves." "Exactly. And once it starts, it spreads. The Council's biggest weakness is that their entire system depends on everyone believing resistance is impossible." Dr. Han studied the economic data. The Council was powerful, but their power was built on a lie. They controlled the galaxy through fear and manipulation, not because they were actually stronger than everyone else combined. "What about the species that have been under Council control for centuries? The ones that don't remember being free?" Yoon-ji smiled. "That's where the information campaign comes in." In a secret facility below the surface of the moon, Commander Sora Chung was preparing for a very different kind of warfare. Her team was made up of teachers, journalists, and historians who had been given military ranks and access to the most powerful communication systems Earth had ever built. "Information is our most powerful weapon," she told her team during their final briefing. "The Council maintains control by controlling what people know. They tell member species that resistance is futile because resistance has never succeeded. But that's not true," said Captain Haywan, who had been a university professor before volunteering for this mission. "We found records of dozens of successful rebellions that the Council covered up." Exactly. And now we're going to broadcast those records to every world in the galaxy simultaneously. Commander Chung activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's communication networks. "The Council monitors official channels, but they don't pay attention to entertainment broadcasts, commercial advertisements, or personal messages." "We're going to hide revolution in advertising?" asked Lieutenant Minho, who had worked in marketing before the crisis. "Among other things, educational programs that teach real galactic history, entertainment shows about heroic rebels, even children's cartoons about standing up to bullies. By the time the Council realizes what's happening, the information will have spread too far to stop." Back on the orbital station, Admiral Dongwoo Kim was meeting with representatives from Earth's various governments. The decision about how to respond to the Council's ultimatum could not be made by the military alone. "What are our chances?" asked President Mi-young Lee, Earth's elected leader and the person who would have to formally respond to the Council. "If we fight them directly, ship to ship, we lose," Admiral Kim said honestly. "They have more ships, more experience, and weapons we don't fully understand yet." "Then why are we even considering resistance?" Dr. Sujin Park leaned forward in her chair. "Because direct military confrontation isn't the only option. The Council expects us to either surrender or fight a conventional war. They're not prepared for asymmetric warfare combined with information operations and economic disruption." "Speak in simple terms, Doctor," said the President. "We're not going to fight their strength. We're going to attack their weaknesses. Their economy depends on slave labor. Their military tactics haven't changed in centuries. Their control system requires that member species believe resistance is impossible. If we can break any one of those things, we can break all of them, Admiral," Kim finished. "But it's risky. If we fail, they'll make an example of Earth that will terrify the galaxy for generations." President Lee was quiet for a long time, looking out at Earth through the station's windows. Down there, 8 billion people were going about their daily lives, unaware that their future was being decided in this room. "What does your gut tell you, Admiral?" "Not the tactical analysis. Your instincts." Dongwoo thought about his years in the military, about the battles he had fought and won against. Impossible odds. "My gut tells me that bullies only understand one thing. Someone has to stand up to them, no matter how big they are. And if we lose, then we lose fighting for our freedom instead of living as slaves. At least our children will know we tried." The President nodded slowly. "Then we fight. But not the way they expect." The meeting ended with Earth's leadership committed to a plan that had never been tried before. Instead of accepting the Council's terms or challenging them to conventional warfare, humanity would do something unprecedented. They would expose the Council's entire system of control while simultaneously demonstrating that resistance was not only possible but inevitable. The preparation phase was almost over. Across the solar system, humans were building ships, training soldiers, and preparing information campaigns that would reach every corner of the galaxy. They were getting ready to teach an ancient galactic empire that some things were worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. In the asteroid belt, Commander Park's ships practiced hit-and-run tactics that no galactic military had seen before. On Earth, factories worked around the clock to produce weapons that would surprise enemies who thought they knew everything about warfare. On the Moon, information warfare specialists prepared to tell the galaxy truths that had been hidden for centuries. The Council had given Earth 30 days to choose between submission and destruction. Earth had used those 30 days to prepare a third option that would shock not just the Council, but every species in the galaxy. In 3 days, the deadline would arrive. The Council expected Earth to make the same choice that every other species had made: surrender with dignity or resist and be destroyed. They were about to learn that humans had never been good at following other people's scripts. The galaxy was about to change forever, and it would start with one small blue world that refused to kneel. President Mi-young Lee stood before the cameras in Earth's orbital station, knowing that her next words would be heard across the entire galaxy. Behind her, through the large windows, Earth turned slowly in space, beautiful and blue and free. In a few minutes, it might be a target for the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Counselor Velthar," she began, looking directly into the camera that would broadcast her message to the Council's flagship. "You asked Earth to make a choice. You gave us 30 days to decide between accepting your terms or facing the consequences of refusal." On the Council ship, Velthar and the other Council members watched the human leader with expressions of bored confidence. They had seen this scene many times before. New species always made dramatic speeches before surrendering. It helped them feel like they still had dignity. "Earth has made its decision," President Lee continued. "We reject your ultimatum completely. We will not give you our resources. We will not limit our expansion. We will not accept the role of servants in your empire." Velthar's expression changed from boredom to surprise. In 1,000 years, no species had ever simply refused the Council's terms without trying to negotiate. "Furthermore," the President continued, "we reject your authority to make such demands of any free people. Earth formally declares that we do not recognize the Galactic Council's right to rule over independent species." Now Velthar looked angry. His forearms moved in gestures of agitation as he turned to the other Council members. This was not following the script. Species were supposed to either submit or make futile military threats. They were not supposed to challenge the Council's fundamental authority. But President Lee was not finished. "To the people of the galaxy who are watching this broadcast, Earth wants you to know the truth about your rulers. The Galactic Council is not a government. It is a protection racket run by criminals who use fear and sabotage to steal from entire civilizations." The camera angle changed to show Dr. Soo-jin Park, who activated a holographic display showing documents and evidence. "For the past month, Earth has investigated the Council's methods. We have found proof that every accident and disaster that forced species to join the Council was actually an act of sabotage. The evidence appeared on screens across the galaxy. Technical specifications for sabotage equipment, communication records between Council agents, detailed plans for engineering disasters on worlds that refused to submit." On the Council ship, Velthar was shouting orders to his subordinates. "Cut the transmission! Jam their signals!" But it was too late. The broadcast was being transmitted on hundreds of different frequencies, bounced off relay stations throughout the galaxy, and hidden inside commercial advertising and entertainment programs. Commander So-Ra Chung's information warfare team had spent weeks setting up a communication network that could not be stopped. President Lee stepped back in front of the camera. "The Council maintains control by making you believe that resistance is impossible. They want you to think that they are too strong to fight. But the truth is, they are parasites who have grown weak from feeding off others for too long." Admiral Dongwoo Kim appeared on screen, standing in front of a tactical display. "The Council's military has not fought a real war in centuries. Their ships are designed for intimidation, not combat. Their tactics are ancient and predictable. Earth's analysis shows that they can be defeated by any species with the courage to fight back. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had been under Council control for generations, people watched the broadcast with growing amazement. For the first time in their lives, they were hearing someone speak about the Council without fear. On the Corvin homeworld, an old engineer named Thek Van watched the human broadcast with tears in his eyes. He remembered when his people had tried to resist 50 years ago. He had helped design the reactor that the Council sabotaged, killing millions of his people. Now he was seeing proof that it had been murder, not an accident. On the Veltar homeworld, citizens gathered in secret to watch the broadcast on hidden screens. They saw evidence that their own leaders were not the wise rulers they claimed to be, but collaborators in a system of galactic slavery. But the Council was not helpless. Even as Earth's broadcast continued, Velthar was activating the weapons, systems that had terrified species into submission for 1,000 years. "Deploy the sabotage drones to the human colonies," he ordered. "Target their life support systems and power generators. Make it look like system failures." On Mars, alarms began blaring in the main colony as critical systems started shutting down. The reactor that powered half the settlement was overheating. The air recycling plants were failing. Water purification systems were going offline one by one. But something unexpected happened. Instead of panicking, the colonists calmly activated backup systems that had been installed in secret over the past month. Engineer Boram Kang's teams had spent weeks preparing for exactly this kind of attack. "Sabotage confirmed," reported the colony's chief engineer over the radio. "All primary systems compromised, but backups are holding. We're running at 90% capacity." The same thing happened at Jupiter's mining stations, at the research outposts on Saturn's moons, at every human settlement in the solar system. The Council's sabotage attacks hit their targets perfectly, but the humans had been ready. Velthar watched the reports with growing confusion. "How are they maintaining operations? The sabotage should have crippled them." "Sir," said one of his technical officers, "they appear to have prepared redundant systems for everything. They knew we were coming." On Earth's orbital station, Admiral Kim was coordinating humanity's response to the Council's attack. "All colonies report successful defense against sabotage. Phase 2 is a go." In the asteroid belt, Commander Sung-Ho Park received the signal he had been waiting for. "All ships, this is Ghost Leader. The Council has fired the first shot. We are now free to respond. Execute Operation Swarm." 60 human ships emerged from hiding among the asteroids, but they did not head toward the Council fleet as expected. Instead, they scattered in all directions, each ship following a different course toward different targets throughout the galaxy. Captain Jae-min Yu commanded one of the fastest ships, a sleek vessel that looked like it had been built from spare parts but could outrun anything the Council had. His target was a Council supply depot 3-star systems away. "Time to jump?" asked his navigator, a young woman named So-Ra, who had volunteered for this mission knowing she might not come back. 30 seconds. Remember, we're not here to destroy the depot. We're here to free the workers." The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving behind a trail that would be visible to Council sensors. Within minutes, every human ship in the EI fleet was broadcasting its location to the entire galaxy, making no attempt to hide their movements. This confused the Council even more. In every previous conflict, enemy ships tried to hide from the Council's superior forces. These human ships were advertising their presence. Captain Yu's ship dropped out of hyperspace near the supply depot, a massive space station that processed raw materials from a dozen enslaved worlds. The station's defenses activated immediately, but the human ship did not attack. Instead, it began broadcasting on all frequencies, sending a message to every worker on the station. The message was simple. "The Council's protection racket is over. Earth has proof of their crimes. You are free to leave. Any ship that wants passage to a free world will be protected." The effect was immediate. Work stopped throughout the station, as beings who had never heard such words tried to understand what they meant. Free to leave? Protected passage? These concepts had been forgotten by species that had lived under Council control for generations, but not everyone had forgotten. Deep in the station's maintenance sections, workers who remembered stories their grandparents told about freedom began to move. They had never believed such stories were real, but now they had proof. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human ships appeared at Council facilities, not to attack them, but to offer their workers something they had thought was impossible: a choice. The Council's military response was swift but confused. Their ships were designed to fight other military vessels, not to deal with an enemy that seemed more interested in talking to civilians than fighting battles. "Sir," reported one of Velthar's officers, "the human ships are not engaging our forces. They're recruiting." "Recruiting what?" "Everyone. Workers, civilians, even some of our own soldiers. They're broadcasting liberation messages and offering transport to any being that wants to leave Council territory." Velthar could not understand what he was seeing. This was not warfare as he knew it. The humans seemed to be trying to steal the Council's population rather than destroy their military. But the most shocking moment came when Captain Yunji's ship appeared directly above the Corvin homeworld. The planet had been under Council control for 50 years, its people broken by the disaster that had killed millions and convinced them that resistance was futile. Captain Yunji's message was broadcast to every screen on the planet. "People of Corva, This is Captain Yunji of the Earth Defense Force. We have evidence that your reactor disaster 50 years ago was sabotage committed by the Galactic Council. Your people did not fail. 6 months after Earth's defiant broadcast, diplomat Chan Wu-jung stood in what had once been the Galactic Council's main assembly hall. The great circular chamber was still impressive, with its high ceiling and walls covered in symbols from dozens of different species. But now those symbols meant something different. Instead of representing conquered peoples, they represented free allies who had chosen to work together as equals. The vote is unanimous, Chan Wu announced to the gathered representatives. The Galactic Federation is officially established. All member species join voluntarily and maintain full sovereignty over their own worlds. The chamber erupted in sounds that would have been impossible 6 months ago, cheers, songs, and expressions of joy in dozens of different languages. Species that had lived as slaves for centuries were celebrating their freedom. At the back of the chamber, Admiral Subin-O watched the proceedings with satisfaction. She commanded the joint liberation fleets that had spent months peacefully dismantling Council control systems throughout the galaxy. It had been the strangest military campaign in galactic history. A war fought without battles, won by offering hope instead of death. Hard to believe it worked, said Captain Jae-min Yu, who stood beside her. His ship had been one of the first to offer freedom to Council workers, starting a chain reaction that spread across the galaxy. The hardest part wasn't fighting the Council, Admiral O replied. It was convincing people that they deserved to be free. That had been the real challenge. After generations of living under Council control, many species had forgotten what freedom looked like. They had been taught that some beings were born to rule and others were born to serve. Breaking that conditioning had required patience, understanding, and proof that another way was possible. Dr. Haewon Kim had led that effort, working with psychologists and teachers from dozens of species to create rehabilitation programs for former Council subjects. Her teams had traveled from world to world, helping beings who had never made their own choices learn how to govern themselves. It's remarkable, she said during one of her reports to Earth. Once people understand that they have options, they adapt quickly. The capacity for freedom was always there. It just needed to be awakened. The process had not been easy. Some species had been under Council control for so long that they panicked when given choices. Others had been so conditioned to obey that they begged to remain servants. A few had tried to recreate the Council's system with themselves in charge, but, slowly, patiently, the galaxy had learned to be free. Director Minho Song oversaw the dismantling of the Council's oppressive technologies. His teams worked carefully to separate the beneficial innovations from the systems of control. Medical technology that could save lives was preserved and shared freely. Communication systems that connected the galaxy were kept running. But weapons, designed for sabotage and intimidation, were destroyed. The interesting thing, he reported to the Federation Assembly, is how much of their technology was designed not to work efficiently, but to maintain dependence. They deliberately made systems that only they could repair, medicines that required constant resupply, tools that broke down if not serviced by Council technicians. It was another layer of control that had kept species dependent even when they might have been capable of independence. The former Council members had reacted differently to their empire's collapse. Some, like Velthar and the leadership of the hegemonic species, had retreated to their homeworld and refused all contact with the outside galaxy. They had been so accustomed to ruling that they could not imagine any other way to exist. Others had tried to adapt. The Velthar species, who had been Velthar's people, but not his supporters, had undergone a revolution of their own. They had removed their old leadership and asked to join the Federation as equals rather than rulers. "We spent 1,000 years as the Council's enforcers," said their new representative, Kethran, who had once secretly met with Ambassador Yoon. "We want to spend the next 1,000 years making up for that." The Corvin Republic had been one of the first to fully embrace freedom. The revelation that their great disaster had been sabotage had ignited a fire in their people that burned away 50 years of submission. Old engineer Thekvan, now in his 80s, had become something of a hero for his role in exposing the truth. "We should have fought back 50 years ago," he said during the ceremony that officially welcomed Corva back into the community of free worlds. "But we were afraid. Earth taught us that fear is a choice, and courage is always possible. The galaxy's economy had undergone massive changes as well. Without the Council's system of forced tribute, species had to learn to trade as equals. Some had worried that this would cause economic collapse, but the opposite had happened. When beings were free to keep the fruits of their labor, they worked harder and innovated faster. When species could trade voluntarily instead of being forced to give away their resources, prosperity increased for everyone. Earth had played a crucial role in this transition. Having never been part of the Council's economic system, humans were able to serve as neutral mediators in trade disputes and to share technologies that had never been suppressed by the Council's need for control. It turns out, said analyst Yoonji Kim during an economic summit, that freedom is not just morally right, it's more efficient. When people have incentives to work and innovate, they create more wealth for everyone. The military situation had stabilized as well. Admiral O's joint fleets had evolved from liberation forces into peacekeeping units that helped resolve disputes between species, learning to be neighbors instead of subjects and rulers. We've had fewer conflicts in 6 months of freedom than the Council had in 6 years of forced peace, she reported. When people can solve their problems through negotiation instead of appealing to overlords, they find better solutions. The transformation had not been without challenges. Some species had tried to use their newfound freedom to attack old enemies. Others had fallen into civil wars as different factions competed for power. A few had begged Earth to rule them, unable to imagine governing themselves. But each crisis had been met with patience and help from other free species. The galaxy was learning that freedom required responsibility, and that responsibility could be shared. As Chan Wu looked around the assembly hall at representatives from over 200 worlds, he thought about how far they had all come. 6 months ago, this room had been a place where slaves came to receive orders from their masters. Now it was a place where equals came to discuss their shared future. The Federation faces many challenges, he said in his closing remarks. We are still learning how to be free. We are still discovering what it means to govern ourselves. We will make mistakes, and we will have to fix them together. But we face these challenges as free beings making our own choices, not as servants, following orders. That makes all the difference. After the ceremony, Chan Wu walked to the chamber's great window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a small blue world called Earth, the species that had started this revolution was going about its daily business. Humans were farming and building, learning and teaching, dreaming of new worlds to explore and new peoples to meet. They had not sought to become the galaxy's liberators. They had simply refused to accept that freedom was impossible. In doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of a truth that had been buried under centuries of oppression, that every being deserved the right to choose their own path. The Council had tried to blackmail humanity into slavery. Humanity's response had freed the galaxy. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Galactic Federation had begun. And at its heart was a simple idea that a small blue world had refused to abandon, that no one should have to kneel to anyone else. In space stations and colonies throughout the galaxy, children were being born who would never know what it felt like to live as slaves. They would grow up free, in a galaxy where freedom was not a privilege granted by rulers, but a right that belonged to all thinking beings. Earth's greatest gift to the galaxy had not been technology or military might. It had been the reminder that courage was contagious, that hope could spread faster than fear, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon against tyranny was simply refusing to believe that tyranny was inevitable. The galaxy was free, and it would remain free as long as beings remembered the lesson that Earth had taught, that freedom was not something you asked for, but something you claimed, defended, and shared with others who had forgotten they deserved it. The stars shone brighter in a galaxy where every light represented not a subject world, but a free people choosing their own destiny among the infinite possibilities of space.